The ancient Sith, a tapestry woven not of a single thread, but of 1,000 tangled, conflicting strands, a chaotic and glorious empire of dark side power that stood in direct opposition to the light of the Jedi Order for millennia. A history, not of two but of legions, not of secrecy but of glorious, terrifying conquest. A saga that begins not with a single man's philosophy, but with a great schism that shattered the unity of the Force itself. This is the story of the old Sith Empires, the golden age of the Sith, the countless wars, the infighting, the triumphs, and the catastrophes that ultimately led to their near-total annihilation and the necessity of the rule of two. It is a history written in blood and fire across the stars. A chronicle of towering figures whose power dwarfed that of later ages, but whose pride and ambition doomed them to repeated cycles of self-destruction. It begins with the exiles, the Dark Jedi who fell from grace and found a new home, a new people, and a new name in the uncharted regions of the galaxy. In the dim, ancient past of the Republic, an order of Force wielders dedicated to peace and knowledge flourished. Yet within it, dissent festered. A faction arose that challenged the stagnant doctrines of the Jedi. They believed the Jedi Code's rejection of emotion was a limitation, a shackle preventing true understanding of the Force. They argued that passion, strength, power, and victory were the true paths to unlocking the full potential of a sentient being. They embraced the darker aspects of nature, seeing not a corruption, but a source of immense energy. This philosophical rift widened over centuries, escalating from debates into open conflict, a series of brutal wars that would be remembered as the 100-Year Darkness. The Jedi, representing the light, eventually triumphed. But their victory was not absolute. The surviving Dark Jedi, defeated and exiled from known space, were cast out, sent on a one-way journey into the unknown aboard unnavigable ships. They were expected to perish, to become a forgotten footnote in Jedi history, but the Force, in its infinite mystery, had other plans. Their desperate journey through the cosmos led them to a remote, red-sunned world in the Outer Rim, a planet strong in the dark side, a world called Korriban. There, they found not an empty rock, but a civilization, the Sith species, a proud, warrior race with a natural affinity for the Force. They were red-skinned, grim-faced beings with tentacle-like beards and a culture built on strength, hierarchy, and the veneration of the dark side. They were ruled by a powerful monarch, the Sithari, a title meaning overlord or god king, the exiled Dark Jedi, with their advanced knowledge of the Force and their technology, appeared to the Sith people as gods. Their power was overwhelming, their presence undeniable. Instead of conquering the natives through force, the exiles instead conquered them through influence. They subjugated the Sith species, not as slaves, but as a new foundation for their own empire. They intermarried with the Sith purebloods, their bloodlines merging, and within generations, the distinction between the original exiles and the Sith species blurred into irrelevance. The name of the species became the name of the Order. They were the Sith, and they built a mighty empire. The first Sith Empire centered on Korriban, with its tombs and academies, and on other dark side strongholds like Ziost and Malachor. They developed a new, powerful language. They crafted artifacts of immense dark side power, and they bided their time, nurturing their hatred for the Jedi and the Republic that had exiled them. They were lost to galactic knowledge, a phantom, a legend, a myth whispered by Jedi to warn of the dangers of the dark side. For 1,000 years, the Sith Empire grew in isolation, its power festering in the dark, its culture becoming ever more devoted to the supremacy of the dark side. This long isolation ended with the unexpected arrival of two hyperspace explorers, Republic scouts named Gav and Jory Daragon, whose malfunctioning ship catapulted them from the known galaxy to Korriban's orbit. Their arrival was the spark that ignited a galactic conflagration. The Sith Lord who captured them, an ambitious and powerful figure named Naga Sato, saw in their arrival not a threat but an opportunity. He realized the Republic and the Jedi had forgotten them. They were vulnerable. Unprepared for a war from a forgotten enemy, he used the explorer ship's navicomputer to plot an invasion. Route back to the Republic. He manipulated the Sith Emperor of the time. Marco Ranios had passed, leaving a power vacuum. Naga Sato and his rival, Ludo Kresh, vied for the empty throne. Sato, ever the schemer, staged an attack by Kresh's forces using illusions, making it appear the Republic had already found them and attacked. This galvanized the Sith Council, who named him the new Sithari, the new Emperor, and gave him absolute authority to wage war. Thus began the Great Hyperspace War. Naga Sato, a master of Sith magic and illusion, led his fleets in a devastating assault on the Republic, his forces appearing out of nowhere, striking at worlds like Coruscant itself. His power was so great, he created phantom armies from whole cloth illusions that could kill, overwhelming the Jedi defenders with sheer terror. But Sato's arrogance was his undoing. His rival, Ludo Kresh, whom he believed dead, emerged to challenge his rule, forcing Sato to split his attention between the war and a civil conflict at home. Furthermore, the Daragon siblings, used by Sato as navigators, turned against him. Gav Daragon sacrificed himself to disrupt Sato's meditation, shattering his concentration and causing his illusory fleets to vanish. The Republic and Jedi, rallied by the Jedi Knight Mehmet Nadil and the Empress Teta, counterattacked fiercely, driving the Sith forces back. Sato, defeated, retreated to his remote base, but was pursued by Jedi forces. In a final act of desperation, he triggered the star of the system to go supernova, hoping to destroy his pursuers. He then fled back to the Sith Empire, only to find it in ruins. Consumed by the civil war he had started, with his power broken, he took a loyal contingent of Massassi warriors and fled to the remote jungle world of Yavin 4. There, using his dark side alchemy, he mutated the Massassi into monstrous, primitive slaves and built great temples to house his spirit, entombing himself in a stasis field to await a future time when his power could once again rise. The Great Hyperspace War was over. The Republic had won, but the Sith were not utterly destroyed, merely scattered, their empire broken into feuding factions, a pattern that would repeat for centuries. The next millennium was a dark age for the Sith, a long period of fragmentation and internecine warfare, known as the Dark Age of the Sith. The remnants of the Empire fought amongst themselves on worlds like Korriban and Sidious, countless petty kings and warlords claiming the title of Dark Lord of the Sith. It was a period of stagnation, a betrayal of the Empire's former glory. From this darkness, a new power emerged, a Dark Lord who sought to reunify the Sith and begin a new crusade against the Republic. His name was Darth Revan, though he began as a Jedi Knight, a hero of the Mandalorian Wars. His story is the story of the Sith's resilience. His fall to the dark side was not one of simple temptation, but of calculated strategy, fighting the Mandalorians on their own brutal terms. Revan and his friend Malak discovered ancient Sith teachings on the remote world of Malachor V. They saw the weakness of the Republic and the necessity of strength. They believed the only way to save the galaxy was to conquer it, to forge it into a weapon to face a greater, unknown threat they had sensed in the unknown regions. They returned from the war as conquerors, not heroes. Taking the ancient titles of Darth Revan and Darth Malak, they built a new Sith Empire, drawing on the remnants of the old, recruiting fallen Jedi and soldiers to their cause. Their war against the Republic was swift and brutal, a conflict known as the Jedi Civil War. Revan was a military genius, a strategist without peer, but his apprentice, Darth Nalak, was a creature of pure ambition and rage. Fearing Revan's power and craving it for himself, Malak betrayed his master, attacking his flagship in the middle of a battle and leaving him for dead. But Revan was found by the Jedi, his memory wiped and retrained as a Jedi. He became the Republic's greatest weapon against his own former empire, hunting down and defeating his old apprentices. He eventually confronted Darth Malak, redeeming himself and destroying the Sith leadership. But the legacy of Revan's Sith Empire did not die with Malak. It splintered, another pattern repeating. Various Sith Lords and acolytes fought for the vacant throne. The most significant of these was Darth Traya, also known as Kriya, a fallen Jedi Master who despised the Force itself for the way it used. Living beings as pawns, she took two apprentices, Darth Nihilus and Darth Sion, and together they formed a new Sith triumvirate. Their war against the Jedi was one of assassination and terror, not conquest. Darth Nihilus became a wound in the Force, a void that consumed the life force of entire worlds to sustain his existence. Darth Sion was a being of pure pain, his body held together by sheer hatred and dark side energy, refusing to die. And Darth Traya, the mistress of betrayal, sought to teach a lone Jedi exile, the one who had defeated Revan's empire, to ultimately use her to destroy the Force itself. This trio brought the Jedi Order to the very brink of extinction, but they too fell to infighting, to the inevitable betrayal that defines the dark side. The Jedi exile defeated all three, ending the threat of the triumvirate, but leaving the Sith once again leaderless, a scattered, broken collection of cults and warlords. Centuries of silence followed. The Sith seemed to be a spent force, a nightmare from a past age. But the dark side always finds a way. From the ashes of these countless failures, a new Sith Empire, a very same one that would eventually produce the Brotherhood of Darkness, began to coalesce in the unknown regions, founded by a surviving pure-blood Sith named Vitiate, who would later take the name Emperor Valkorion. This emperor was unlike any Sith before him. His power was fathomless. His life extended for over 1,000 years through rituals that consumed the life force of entire planets. He was a patient, cold, and utterly ruthless entity whose sole purpose was the consumption of all life in the galaxy. He rebuilt the Sith Empire in secret, creating a sophisticated society with a new Sith Order at its core, an order that learned from the past, that incorporated military discipline and a strict, though still treacherous, hierarchy. When this empire finally emerged from the shadows, it launched a new invasion, the Great Galactic War, which lasted for decades. This war was not the swift blitz of Nanisato, but a grinding, brutal conflict that ravaged the galaxy. It featured legendary figures like the Jedi Knight Sathal Shan and the Sith Lord Darth Malgus, a warrior of pure, destructive fervor. The war ended in a tense ceasefire, a cold war where both sides licked their wounds and plotted their next move. This eventually erupted into a new series of conflicts, all orchestrated by the immortal Sith Emperor, who saw the constant war as a means to weaken both the Republic and his own Sith followers, making them easier to ultimately consume. This period of on-again, off-again war finally gave way to the final, catastrophic failure of the old ways. The time of the Brotherhood of Darkness, the direct precursor to the rule of two, the Sith Empire, had fractured again. The line of Dark Lords was broken, and a new philosophy took hold, one that was a direct, reactive rejection of the powerful individual lords of the past. The Brotherhood of Darkness, led by a man named Lord Khan, believed the Sith's repeated failures were due to the ambition of individual Sith Lords. He proposed a radical equality, a brotherhood where all were Sith Lords, where the title was diluted and shared among many. There would be no single Dark Lord, only a collective leadership. This was a Sith democracy, a fundamentally flawed concept that flew in the face of the dark side's very nature, which thrives on passion, ambition, and individual strength. The Brotherhood waged war against the Jedi army of light, led by the relentless Lord Hoth. This war, the new Sith Wars, dragged on for a century, a bloody stalemate that drained the resources of both sides and turned entire sectors into wastelands. It was a war of attrition, a pointless struggle with no vision and no end goal beyond destruction. The final battle of this war, the Battle of Ruzin, was the crucible in which the old Sith died and the new were born. The forces of the Brotherhood and the Army of Light met on the planet Ruzon. For a final decisive engagement, the fighting was brutal, a meat grinder that consumed Jedi and Sith alike. It was here that a common soldier in the Brotherhood, a man named Dessel, who would become Darth Bane, saw the utter bankruptcy of Khan's philosophy. He saw the infighting, the jealousy, the weakness that festered within the collective. He saw that a Sith Order based on equality was a contradiction, a path to mediocrity and defeat. In a desperate, final act of madness, Lord Khan, persuaded by the manipulations of the Dark Lord Scare Khan, devised the ultimate weapon, the Thought Bomb, an ancient Sith artifact that would consume the life force of every Force-sensitive being on the planet, creating a permanent wound in the Force. Khan, in his insanity, believed this would grant him victory. He lured the Jedi Army of Light into a cavern and detonated the device. In an instant, every Jedi and every Sith on Ruzin, save one, had their spirits ripped from their bodies and trapped in an eternal prison of dark side energy. The Jedi Order was decimated, but the Sith Brotherhood was utterly annihilated. The only survivor was Darth Bane, who had recognized the folly and fled the system. He was alone, the last Sith Lord in a galaxy that believed his kind extinct, gazing upon the cosmic scale failure of the old ways, the endless cycles of rise and fall, of glorious empires collapsing into petty infighting. He understood the fundamental truth. The Sith could not defeat the Jedi by becoming a dark mirror of their order. By relying on numbers, their strength was in the individual, in the focused, uncompromising power of the dark side, and in that moment of absolute solitude, surrounded by the echo of 1,000,000 deaths, he conceived the doctrine that would define the next 1,000 years. A simple, brutal, and elegant solution. The rule of two. One master to embody the power, one apprentice to crave it. Thus ended the Age of Sith Legions, and began the age of the Phantom, the Shadow, the Patient Knife in the Dark. The Legends rule of two Sith lineage. A dark and secretive creed. 1,000-year whisper in the galaxy's ear. A singular doctrine of ultimate power and its insatiable craving. Conceived in the smoldering aftermath of catastrophic defeat. A necessary evolution from the self-destructive chaos of the old ways. A grand design for the ultimate revenge. A patient, meticulous, and utterly ruthless plan to extinguish the light of the Jedi Order and usher in a new age of Sith dominion. This is the story not of an army, but of a bloodline, a chain of two, one master and one apprentice, a continuous thread of dark side energy passed from one vessel to the next, each pair stronger than the last, each generation building upon the knowledge and the power of the previous, all moving in shadow, all working towards a single glorious purpose. The story begins not with a triumph, but with a near total annihilation. The Battle of Ruzin, a conflict so devastating it shattered the Sith Brotherhood of Darkness and nearly erased the very concept of the Sith from galactic history. But from this ash, from this utter desolation, a new philosophy was forged, a sharper, deadlier, and more focused weapon, the rule of two, and its architect was the last surviving Sith Lord of the old order, a man of immense will and terrifying conviction. Darth Bane, the founder, the visionary, the absolute beginning of this new path. He was a man born into brutality and hardship, a miner on the desolate world of Apatros. His early life a constant struggle against the crushing weight of poverty and violence, yet within him burned fire that could not be quenched, a latent connection to the Force that yearned for expression. His escape from that life was as brutal as the life itself, a path paved with violence and death. He found his way to the Sith Academy on Korriban, a place of ancient evil and dark side power, where he quickly distinguished himself, not through blind aggression, but through a cunning and ruthless intellect. He saw the fatal flaw in the Brotherhood of Darkness, their reliance on numbers, their endless infighting, their weakness born from a collective of mediocre power rather than a concentration of supreme strength. He understood that the Sith could not defeat the Jedi by mimicking their structure, by becoming a mere dark reflection of a light side army. The Sith's strength was in passion, in individuality, in the raw, unfiltered power of the dark side, a power that could not be shared or governed by committee. It had to be focused, honed. To a razor's edge, he witnessed the final folly of the Brotherhood on Ruzin. Their leader, Lord Khan, in a desperate and foolish attempt to achieve victory, unleashed a thought bomb, a Sith artifact of unimaginable destructive power that consumed the life force of every Force-sensitive being on the planet, Jedi and Sith alike. But Bane, perceiving the trap, the ultimate failure of the old ways, fled the system. He alone survived, the last Sith Lord, and in that solitude he conceived the future, the rule of two, a simple, elegant, and brutal doctrine. There would be only two Sith, a master to embody the power of the dark side, and an apprentice to crave it, to learn from it, and eventually to challenge for it. This constant cycle of teaching and challenge, of betrayal and succession, would ensure that only the strongest, the most cunning, the most worthy would ever hold the title of Dark Lord of the Sith. It would purge the weakness of the past. It would create an order of unparalleled power, an order that could operate in complete secrecy, hidden from the Jedi who believed them extinct, biding their time, manipulating events from the shadows, gathering knowledge and influence over centuries, until the moment was right to strike. Bane, now the first master of this new order, needed an apprentice, a vessel for his knowledge, and the first link in the new chain. He found her on Ruzin, a young girl named Zannah, who had witnessed the horrors of war and whose innate talent for Sith sorcery was already manifesting in terrifying ways. He saw in her not a companion, but a tool, the future of the Sith, the first apprentice to crave the power he embodied. Darth Zannah, the first apprentice, the inheritor of the grand design. She was a stark contrast to her master, where Bane was a figure of immense physical power and martial prowess, a master of lightsaber combat and telekinetic devastation. Zannah was subtle. Her strength lay in the arcane and the mental. She was a prodigy of Sith sorcery, able to weave illusions so potent they could kill, to cloud minds and break wills with a whisper, to summon creatures from the depths of the dark side. Her cunning was her greatest weapon, a patience that mirrored Bane's own. She understood the rule of two, not as a partnership, but as a long game, a waiting game. She learned everything he had to teach. She craved the power he embodied, and she knew that one day she would have to take it. Their relationship was the purest expression of Bane's philosophy. A master constantly testing his apprentice, an apprentice constantly seeking a moment of weakness, a perfect dynamic of teacher and potential usurper. The legend of their final confrontation is a testament to this, a brutal duel that stretched both their powers to the absolute limit. Bane's raw force against Zannah's dark sorcery. It is said that in the end, Zannah prevailed, not by overpowering Bane directly, but by using his own strength against him, by trapping his essence in a vortex of dark side energy. Thus she became the master, the second Dark Lord of the new Sith Order, and her first duty was to secure the lineage, to find an apprentice of her own, a successor who would continue the work. She sought a being whose connection to the Force was unique, whose potential could be shaped to further the grand design. She found such a being in an Iktoshi, a species known for their natural precognitive abilities, a young Force-sensitive seer named, after her transformation, Darth Cognis, The third Sith Lord, the Seer, she was a hunter by trade, a tracker of rare and dangerous game, a skill that translated perfectly to the needs of the hidden Sith. Her innate gift for foresight, for glimpses of possible futures, made her an invaluable asset to the Order, allowing the Sith to navigate the currents of time with a slight advantage. To avoid potential pitfalls, and to identify moments of opportunity, she was, by all accounts, fiercely devoted to the rule of two as established by Darth Bane. She saw the perfection in its simplicity, the necessity of its brutality. She served Darth Zannah faithfully, learning the ways of the dark side and the devised secrets of Sith magic. She became a powerful lord in her own right, a master of manipulation and assassination, operating from the shadows to subtly influence galactic events towards the Sith's long-term goals. When the time came for her to succeed Zannah, the transition was, according to the doctrine, a violent one, a necessary culling of the previous generation to ensure the strength of the next. With Zannah's power now hers, Cognis took on the mantle of master and began her own search for an apprentice. She sought someone whose vision could complement her own, whose understanding of the Force could push the boundaries of Sith knowledge. She found a candidate, a being of immense potential who would become Darth Millennial, a name that would come to signify a schism, a moment of heresy within the otherwise straight line of succession. Darth Millennial, the fourth Sith Lord, the heretic, he was an individual of profound and unique connection to the Force. His abilities in prophecy and foresight far surpassed even those of his master Cognis. He could see not mere glimpses, but vast, swirling tapestries of potential futures. This gift, however, became his curse, his undoing. As he delved deeper into the mysteries of the dark side, as his visions became more complex and overwhelming, he began to question the very foundation of the Order he served. He came to believe that the rule of two was flawed, that it was too limiting, too narrow a path to ultimate power. He envisioned a new doctrine, a rule of three, a trinity of dark side power that would be more dynamic, more resilient, and ultimately more powerful than the dyad of master and apprentice. This was a fundamental betrayal of Darth Bane's teaching, a dangerous deviation that threatened to splinter the Sith and return them to the infighting that had doomed them. A millennium before, Darth Cognis, ever the traditionalist, ever the devoted follower of Bane's way, would not tolerate this heresy. A confrontation was inevitable, a clash not just of power but of ideology. Millennial, realizing he could not defeat his master and impose his new vision, was forced to flee. He was cast out, excommunicated from the main Sith lineage. He vanished into the unknown regions, where he eventually founded his own splinter group, the Dark Side Prophets, who followed his rule of three. Thus, the main lineage, the true line of Bane, was threatened, but it endured. Darth Cognis, having purged the weakness from her line, now had to find a new apprentice, one who would remain faithful to the true path. The next links in the chain are shrouded in even deeper mystery, their names lost to time, their deeds recorded only in fragments. The first was an unnamed human apprentice, a loyalist who took up the mantle after Cognis, reaffirming the rule of two and working to erase the stain of Millennial's betrayal. This human Sith Lord then took an apprentice of his own, an unknown Devonian Sith Lord, a member of a species known for their distinctive appearance and physical resilience. Together, these two shadowy figures carried the flame of Bane's legacy through the centuries, operating with such perfect secrecy that the Jedi Order remained completely unaware of their existence. Their contributions to Sith knowledge are unknown, but their greatest achievement was simply their survival, their unwavering commitment to the long game, ensuring that the lineage continued unbroken through a period of galactic history that offered little opportunity for overt action. They were the guardians of the dream, the patient watchers in the dark. Then emerged a Sith Lord so unusual, so antithetical to the traditional image of a rage-fueled dark side warrior. that he stands as a unique anomaly in the entire lineage. Darth Vectivus, the so-called good Sith, he was, by all accounts, a phenomenally successful and wealthy businessman, a magnate who operated a massive mining enterprise. He was not driven by a thirst for conquest or a desire to rule the galaxy. Instead, he approached the dark side with a detached, almost scientific curiosity. He saw it as a source of knowledge to be studied and understood, not merely a weapon to be wielded. He constructed a secret fortress on a remote world, a center for his dark side research, where he reportedly lived a comfortable life, surrounded by colleagues and even friends. He never sought conflict with the Jedi. He never engaged in grandiose schemes for power. He simply used the dark side to further his understanding of the universe and to enhance his own considerable intellect. His philosophy demonstrated a terrifying truth about the Bene Sith, their adaptability, their ability to hide not just in physical shadows, but in plain sight, disguised as a respectable, even benevolent member of society. Vectivus was a hidden threat of a different kind, a proof of concept that a Sith Lord could exist without the trappings of mustached whirling villainy. He was, nevertheless, a master of the dark side, and he took an apprentice, a woman who would become Darth Guile. Little is known of Guile's tenure as apprentice or her time as master, only that her end came not at the hands of her own apprentice, but through the blade of a Jedi Master, a rare and dangerous breach of secrecy that must have sent shockwaves through the lineage, a reminder that despite their patience, the Jedi were always a threat, a risk that had to be managed with extreme care. The lineage continued, the title of Dark Lord passing to another shadowy figure, Darth Gravid, whose reign would represent another, far more dangerous form of heresy than that of Millennial. Where Millennial had sought to expand the rule of two, Gravid sought to dilute it. He began to study Jedi teachings, to see value in their philosophy of peace and detachment. He became convinced that the only path to true ultimate power was a synthesis of light and dark, a merging of Jedi and Sith ideologies. This was not just a deviation. It was an existential threat to the entire Sith project. 1,000 years of accumulated knowledge, of carefully hoarded power and secrets, was jeopardized by his misguided belief in his attempt to merge the two sides. He began to destroy Sith artifacts, to erase ancient texts, to purge the very knowledge he was sworn to preserve and increase. He was actively unraveling the tapestry woven by Bane and all his successors. His apprentice, a woman named Darth Bane, watched in horror as her master betrayed everything the Sith stood for. She understood that his actions would lead to the utter annihilation of their order, that his weakness was a cancer that had to be cut out, fulfilling the most sacred duty of the apprentice. She confronted him, she fought him, and she killed him. She became Darth Bane, the savior of the lineage, but at a great cost. Much of the Sith's accumulated knowledge had been lost forever. Set back by Gravid's insanity, her reign was likely spent in recovery, in attempting to rebuild the archives and reaffirm the core principles of the rule of two. She would have been a traditionalist, a hardliner, determined to never allow such a weakness to infect the line again. She found an apprentice in a man known as Darth Ramage, a Sith Lord who returned to a more analytical, scientific approach to the dark side. Darth Ramage, the Sith scientist, he was obsessed with the nature of the Force itself, particularly with finding a way to weaponize it against the Jedi on a fundamental level. His life's work was the pursuit of a method to permanently sever a Jedi's connection to the Force, to not just kill them, but to utterly break them, to strip them of their very identity. His research, while likely monstrous in its methods, represented the continuous evolution of Sith knowledge, a direct application of their hidden power towards their ultimate goal, the destruction of the Jedi Order. He understood that a final confrontation would require more than just martial superiority. It would require a way to negate the Jedi's greatest advantage, their unity with the Force, Ramage's work. His theories and experiments would be passed down to his apprentice, a being of immense intellect from a species known for its cerebral prowess, a Bith Sith Lord who would take the name Darth Tenebrous. Darth Tenebrous, the penultimate master. A brilliant physicist and engineer, he embodied the modern evolution of the Sith. He was not a warlord, but a manipulator, a thinker. He used his scientific genius to further his understanding of the Force, viewing it through a lens of quantum physics and hyperdimensional reality. He could perceive the midi-chlorians, the microscopic life forms that communicated the Force, and he believed he could manipulate them to achieve ultimate power. He foresaw the coming of the grand plan's culmination, the Jedi Purge, the rise of the Sith Empire. But his vision was flawed. He saw his own apprentice, a moon named Darth Plagueis, as a tool, a vessel for his own future consciousness, planning to use a dark side technique to transfer his essence into Plagueis' body at the moment of his assassination, thus cheating death and ruling forever. His arrogance, his failure to truly understand the nature of the rule of two, would be his downfall. He trained Plagueis to be too clever, too powerful, too perfect a Sith, and when the moment came, Plagueis, aware of his master's plan, turned the tables. He killed Tenebrous. But in a final act of spite, Tenebrous used his last breath to show Plagueis a vision of his own death at the hands of his future apprentice. A grim prophecy that would haunt Plagueis for the rest of his days. Darth Plagueis the Wise, the last master before the endgame, a moonbanker, a creature of incredible political and financial influence. He was the perfect Sith Lord for the modern galaxy. He operated from the highest levels of corporate and political power, using his vast wealth to manipulate governments, fuel conflicts, and shape the galactic economy to his will, all while pursuing his own dark side research in secret. His greatest achievement, the one he believed would cement his legacy as the greatest Sith Lord of all time, was his discovery of a dark side technique to cheat death. To keep himself and others from dying, he saw this as the ultimate victory over the Jedi, who preached acceptance of the Force's will to Plagueis. The Force's will was to be conquered. He believed he had achieved immortality, that he could rule the galaxy forever, alongside a powerful apprentice. He took a young, terrifyingly ambitious man from Naboo as his apprentice, naming him Darth Sidious. Together, they worked to put the final pieces of the grand plan into motion. Sidious was the public face of their schemes, a charismatic politician rising through the ranks of the Republic, while Plagueis worked the financial and corporate levers from behind the scenes. They engineered a crisis on Naboo, propelling Sidious, in his public persona as Senator Palpatine, to the position of Supreme Chancellor. Plagueis, in his arrogance, believed Sidious to be a partner, a true equal. He had grown complacent, believing his power over life and death made him invulnerable. He failed to remember the first lesson of the rule of two. The apprentice always craves the master's power. And one night, as Plagueis slept, drunk on his own power and ambition, Darth Sidious murdered him, taking his place as the sole Dark Lord of the Sith. The culmination of 1,000 years of planning, Darth Sidious, the ultimate success. The master of the grand plan, he was everything Darth Bane had envisioned and more. A Sith Lord of unparalleled power. Cunning and patience, he operated in plain sight. The beloved leader of the Galactic Republic, all while being its greatest enemy. He engineered the Clone Wars, a galaxy-spanning conflict that pitted Jedi against Jedi, that drained the Republic's resources and allowed him to amass emergency dictatorial powers. He was the master of both sides, the Chancellor of the Republic and the Dark Lord of the Separatists. He used the war to test the Jedi, to stretch them thin, to make the galaxy crave order and security, which he would then provide in the form of a tyrannical empire. He trained apprentices not as successors in the traditional sense, but as tools, as weapons to be used and discarded. First came Darth Maul, a weapon of pure aggression, a terrifying symbol of the Sith's return. Though Sidious considered him replaceable, which he was, next came Darth Tyrannus, the fallen Jedi Master Count Dooku, a political tool, a charismatic figurehead to lead the Separatists, a noble facade for a monstrous enterprise. He too was a pawn, meant to be sacrificed when the time was right. And finally, the Chosen One, the culmination of Sith prophecy, Anakin Skywalker, who became Darth Vader, the ultimate enforcer, the fist of the new empire, with Order 66, the execution of the Jedi Purge that Darth Tenebrous had foreseen. Sidious achieved absolute victory. The Republic became the Galactic Empire. The Jedi were nearly exterminated, and the Sith ruled openly. It was the triumph of the rule of two, a 1,000-year plan brought to perfect, bloody fruition. But the rule of two contained the seeds of its own destruction. The very essence of the master-apprentice relationship was betrayal. The constant craving for power. In the end, Darth Vader, the apprentice, did indeed crave his master's power, but not for the sake of the Sith, not for the dark side. His motivation was a flicker of light, the love for his son Luke Skywalker. When Sidious tortured Luke, seeking to turn him to the dark side and replace Vader, he pushed his apprentice too far. In a final redemptive act, Vader seized his master and threw him down a reactor shaft, destroying the Sith Lord, the vessel of a millennium of knowledge and power. In that moment, the rule of two ended. The lineage was broken, not by a Jedi army, but by its own flawed, cyclical nature. The apprentice had killed the master, but not to usurp his place, but to destroy the very system itself. Vader himself died moments later, his own life support damaged, and with him, the last active Sith Lord perished. The prophecy of the Chosen One was fulfilled not by destroying the Sith in combat, but by bringing balance through sacrifice. The long, dark line that began with Darth Bane's brilliant, ruthless insight on Ruusan ended in the heart of the second Death Star. Not with a proclamation of victory, but with a final, quiet act of love. The Sith were gone. Balance was restored, and the galaxy, though scarred and broken, could begin to heal from the 1,000-year wound inflicted by the legend's rule of two. Yet the shadows of the dark side never truly dissipate. Remnants of Sith ideology, the whispers of ambition, the lingering echoes of forbidden knowledge, persisted in secret, scattered across the galaxy, hidden in ancient holocrons, in the minds of Force-sensitive beings, in the forgotten tombs of Korriban and the ruins of Malachor. The story of the Sith did not end with Vader. It evolved, it transformed into myths and legends, cautionary tales whispered to Jedi initiates, and chronicled in secret histories. The rule of two became a blueprint, not merely for power, but for patience, for secrecy, for the long game that stretches across centuries. It demonstrated that the dark side is not just a weapon of brute force, but a philosophy, a strategy, a patient predator waiting for the perfect moment. In the centuries following the Empire's fall, individuals and small groups, inspired by the teachings of Darth Bane and the cunning of Sidious, attempted to resurrect Sith power. Secret cults emerged in the unknown regions, on isolated planets, in abandoned academies, each claiming knowledge of ancient rituals, each seeking to restore the Sith to its former glory. Some were fanatical, others scholarly, but all shared the same core principle, that the Sith endure, that the dark side is eternal. Even when hidden, even when defeated, this enduring legacy influenced new Force-sensitive beings, shaping choices and destinies, compelling some to pursue the dark side while warning others of its seductive dangers. The galaxy never fully escaped the shadow of the Sith. And though the rule of two was a model of precision, it was also a reminder that the dark side thrives not only in power but in patience, in secrecy, in cunning, and above all, in the willingness to betray, to sacrifice, to endure. The story of the Sith, from the exiles on Korriban to the rise of Sidious, is a testament to the unrelenting nature of ambition and the infinite adaptability of the dark side. It is a chronicle of strategy, of the careful cultivation of knowledge, of the long and patient accumulation of power. A legacy written not in fleeting victories, but in meticulous planning and ruthless execution. It is a story that spans millennia, that transcends mere individuals, that demonstrates that the Force itself can be wielded as a tool of patience, manipulation, and ultimate control. The Rule of Two, while seemingly simple, encapsulates the entirety of Sith philosophy, a model that balances destruction with preservation, secrecy with influence, cruelty with cunning, and in its quiet, shadowed way, it ensured that the Sith could survive even when the galaxy believed them extinct. In this sense, the story of the Rule of Two is not just the history of a lineage. It is the history of ambition made absolute, of patience made weapon, of darkness made inexorably effective. It is the tale of the Sith as both architects and predators, masters of a philosophy that prizes cunning over strength, secrecy over spectacle, the long game over immediate gratification. And it is a testament to the terrifying efficacy of an idea perfected over 1,000 years. The Rule of Two is more than a doctrine. It is a living, breathing mechanism of survival, a distilled essence of the dark side, a system so robust and cunning that it persisted through disasters, betrayals, and near-extinction events, from the young ashes of Ruzin to the hidden legacies scattered across the galaxy. Each Sith Lord a link in a chain of power, each apprentice learning, coveting, and inevitably replacing the master. The Rule of Two ensured not just the survival of the Sith, but the perfection of their methods. It transformed them from a sprawling, infighting empire into a shadow network capable of manipulating entire civilizations without ever being seen. It codified the principles of patience, secrecy, adaptability, and ruthless calculation, principles that allowed the Sith to operate in a galaxy dominated by the Jedi. The political institutions of the Republic, and later, the Galactic Empire. The true genius of the Rule of Two lies not in the immediate power it grants, but in the cumulative generational mastery it ensures, each master refining knowledge, each apprentice surpassing the last, each cycle a crucible of power and cunning. The Sith of the Rule of Two are therefore not simply individuals. They are the sum of centuries of planning, of wisdom hard-earned through survival, betrayal, and study. Their power is not merely personal, but historical, a force inherited and honed through deliberate, patient cultivation. It is in this light that one understands the full scope of the Sith, that they are not merely villains, nor mere warriors, but an idea given life, a philosophy incarnate, a network of calculated ambition stretching across centuries. And while Darth Sidious' fall and the death of Darth Vader may have ended the active public lineage, the principles of the Rule of Two, the lessons of patience, secrecy, and relentless cunning, remain a ghostly shadow over the galaxy, a reminder that the Sith, once they take root, do not simply vanish. They endure, they whisper, they shape, and their legacy, whether in legends, holocrons, or the choices of future Force-sensitive beings, continues to haunt the galaxy, as eternal as the dark side itself, as inevitable as ambition, as inexorable as the hunger for power. The story of the Rule of Two is therefore more than history. It is a meditation on survival, on strategy, on the patient accumulation of strength. It is an exploration of the darkest facets of ambition and intellect. It is a chronicle of a philosophy that prizes cunning above all. And while the Sith may rise and fall, scatter and hide, they leave behind a legacy that is nearly indestructible, a framework of thought, a code of action, a lineage of power that persists as long as there is a galaxy to manipulate and a dark side to wield. This is the enduring truth of the Sith, the final quiet terror of their philosophy, that the dark side, once embraced fully and applied with discipline and patience, is virtually immortal, a force that survives the deaths of its practitioners. the collapse of its empires, the triumph of its enemies. And it is in this sense that the rule of two transcends mortality, transcends even the individual ambitions of its masters and apprentices. It is an abstracted, perfected form of the dark side's potential, an ongoing silent dominion over the galaxy that operates in the shadows, shaping events, guiding outcomes, and waiting for the moment when a new pair, a new master and apprentice, can rise and continue the unbroken chain of power that began with Darth Bane. And so the saga of the Sith, from the exiles of Korriban to the fall of Sidious, is ultimately the story of an idea perfected, a philosophy distilled, a doctrine tested through millennia, a testament to patience, ambition, and the unending hunger for ultimate power, a story not merely of individuals or wars, but of strategy, survival, and the meticulous, shadowed accumulation of influence across the stars. And it is in this shadowed, patient, and cunning form that the Sith endure, even when thought extinct, whispering through history, through legend, through the Force itself. The rule of two remains the ultimate distillation of the dark side, a philosophy, a strategy, a living, breathing mechanism of survival, whose echo reverberates through every tale of the Sith, a testament to the brilliance, ruthlessness, and unyielding patience of those who would dominate the galaxy in secret, shaping the fate of countless generations, guiding events from behind the curtain, waiting for the moment when darkness, wielded with discipline, precision, and cunning, can once again rise to claim the galaxy.